Oh man, I'm excited for you guys to hear from my friend Autumn, who actually Autumn and I go back way back to, well, we connected right at the beginning, I think, of my son being diagnosed. And then Autumn and her husband Matt have been really heavily involved in our nonprofit Kick Cancer from the beginning, from as soon as we started it, because they believed so much in what we were doing and helping children thrive through cancer that since the day we started sending Kick Cancer kits out, they have donated product to go in the kits. We're going on like 9 years now. And in addition, they've even come to our retreats to speak. And we just are so
Mm.
thankful for them. But Autumn is here today, and she's actually the perfect person. I was thinking about this conversation that I have often with family and friends, but many of you ask me on social media, like, well, Susan, what's wrong with just organic meat? Well, Autumn is the expert, and she was just reminding me that she's in more education to learn more about it now. This woman is one of the smartest women already. And so when you get to hear from her, you're going to be like, why does she need more education? She's that smart. But I'm really excited for you to
Oh,
learn from Autumn today. And Autumn is currently in Boulder, and I mentioned that in our intro. But one of my favorite little things that I want you guys to know about her is they started a restaurant in Boulder. So if you live in Boulder, you need to go to their restaurant because it is a completely regeneratively farming. Well, they serve only regeneratively farmed meat, no seed oils, no vegetable oils. Like it is, from my understanding, the healthiest option, probably in the United States. I don't know. What's the name of it, Autumn?
well, I like to think so. Yeah.
What's the name of the restaurant?
It's called Wild Pastures Burger Company.
That's right, Wild Pastures Burger. Awesome. Well, Autumn, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for everybody to hear from you. I would love if you're willing to just share a little bit about how you even got here. Like, here you are running two amazing companies and a restaurant, and you have a family, and more, you just continue to get more education. But where did your interest in this idea of natural health and taking control of your environment, where did that come from?
Okay, I'm excited to share, but first I just want to say the love is mutual. And yeah, I think your mission is so important. My niece actually had cancer when she was 7 years old. And so everything you're doing just like resonates with me to my core. So thank you for all that work. Uh, my story started when I was about 10 and I had irritable bowel syndrome, just kind of like bloating, a lot of pain. Like I was in so much pain one time. I had my mom take me to the emergency room and they were like, "Oh, you've got gas, you've got irritable bowel syndrome." And it sounded, not that serious. And that was kind of how it was treated, but it was really debilitating to me. It was unpredictable when it was going to happen. And it interfered with my social life. Eventually, because of the gut brain connection, it started to mess with my mental health. And I was a mess in high school. I got kicked out of my parents' house because I was in both physical and emotional pain and I didn't really know what to do with it. I started using substances. So I fortunately pulled myself together and still went to college and went to LA to pursue a dance career and met the amazing husband that I have today named Chaz. And it was when we got close that he was like, "Wow, you're suffering in silence. You look happy. You're doing the things, but you're really struggling. And so let's figure this out together." And we went to doctors in LA, same thing. You have irritable bowel syndrome. And it wasn't until we decided to change our diet. He found a few people on the internet having luck with diet. I just kind of was going along with it, even though I didn't think it would help. And it helped so much that all of my digestive issues went away in 30 days. Digestive symptoms, right? We had other things
Wow.
to address later on in the game, but it was such a profound change. And over the course of the next year, my mental health, I became less anxious, more stable. A light kind of came back on for me. I wasn't managing, I was thriving for the first time in decades. And so that transformation, even though I had a celebrity fitness trainer job and at Tracy Anderson, and I love her so much, I was like, I need to go back to school and understand what just happened because that's the piece I need to give away. And I realized fitness is different than wellness, right? And I wanted
Yeah.
to teach people how to get well. And so that's why I went on this never ending string of schools that I'm just now finishing. But along the way, we realized people didn't have realistic tools and food products, right? Like when you have to really be mindful of what you're putting in your body, where are those processed food products or available. You don't find them very often. So we wanted to create them. And then with our Wild Pastures meat delivery service, because we started with a beef stick, those are what we've been donating to your box. We
Yes.
learned a lot of farmers, learned a lot about the nuances in agriculture. How is grass fed different than regenerative, and what's organic, and they were teaching us about this new method of agriculture called regenerative agriculture that this country desperately needs, this world desperately needs, because of what we've done to the topsoil. But these farmers and ranchers, they didn't know how to connect. They don't know how to market. They didn't know how to find their people, right, who would pay and appreciate their product. And so we became that middleman. And then the burger restaurant just came out of our true desire to use the whole animal and never waste anything. We were always long in ground beef, and Boulder didn't have what we considered an amazing grass-fed burger yet. And so we started the restaurant there. But all of these companies are a direct result of my struggles with my health and having
Wow.
to go outside the traditional system.
I love that you use your experience to go, okay, there's a problem. I found this solution, but now actually I realize how many more people are probably struggling and need this solution as well. And thus started with the beef stick, and now is this incredible multifaceted multi-company that is nourishing people all around, which a real quick note, like this is one of the things I told her right before we hit record. There's a couple things in my family, and as a functional nutritionist and being, educated in all of the things of what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. My family still, their two favorite things, especially my husband and my son, are jerky and bacon. And so God forbid I ever take any of those away. Well, unfortunately, most jerky is crap. And then bacon,
Yeah.
we actually don't eat a lot of pork. We've kind of cut that out over the years, but turkey bacon is just not the same. So knowing that we found a beef stick in Paleo Valley that is legitimately, not only is it good, but it's like actually has health benefits. And then a bacon that is beef. I mean, listen, you could probably end the podcast here and you're like, okay, good, awesome. So beef jerky that gives me health benefits and bacon that is really healthy.
Yes. Yes. It's so funny too. Now that you say that you've eliminated pork, and a lot of pork is very, highly inflammatory. I don't know your reasons for doing it, but most of it's coming out of confinement systems that are, heavily fed with grains, and then their omega-6 to 3 profile is off. And so, yeah, when you feed an animal, pig and beef, cow, correctly, or with a lot of grass, that's going to be a very different story. And so our
Yes.
bacon is definitely far more healthy than anything you're going to find at the grocery store. Way
So let
different.
me ask you, because that kind of leads us into this really helping people understand this difference of, for example, they go to the store and they go to Whole Foods, or what many call whole paycheck. They go to Whole Foods and they see there's a package of grass-fed ground beef, right? And then they go to, go to their farmer's market, and at their farmer's market is this little farm, and they're selling, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And then they have these other labels that you just mentioned, like regeneratively farmed and, beyond organic. Help us understand as a consumer, what is the big difference between just grocery store grass-fed and this movement that you guys are really kind of behind, being the big facilitators of regeneratively raised grass-fed beef?
Oh my goodness, such a great question. Such a big topic. But I'm going to start high level. So essentially, when you speak to farmers and ranchers, they'll tell you there's about 3 types of agriculture happening in the world today. There is degenerative agriculture. It's extractive. It's taking out more than it's putting back. It's using chemicals. It's using fertilizers that pollute our waterways, that pollute our air, that create disease and pathogens and antibiotics and all of those things. There's also sustainable. Now, I would put organic in that. So sustainable is not using certain chemicals, right? And so it's not making the land worse, but it isn't always making the land better, right? There's still things like tillage, which is one of the most environmentally destructive practices being done in organic agriculture. And also when it comes to animal products, there's other nuances that I'll share in a second. But regenerative is a type of agriculture, and it's not a new type. That's what's really fascinating about this. It's the way we were doing things before, when we were working more in alignment with nature rather than against nature. And it takes land and returns it to a higher or more worthy state. So the very important thing to know about regenerative agriculture and regeneratively raised meats is that they're measuring ecological outcomes. There's 6 principles, the most important of which is context, right? We're looking at what does this land have going on right now? Where are we at in the world? How much precipitation? What are we working with? And how do we get that particular piece of land back to where we need it to be? Now, this is important because for the last 10,000 years, we've been practicing destructive agriculture. As a result, we've lost about a third of farmable land in the last 40 years. Some people will estimate we have 60, 80, 100 years left of where we're going to be able to produce our own food. No one truly knows, but what we do know is that it's absolutely a necessity that we transform this system. So the industrial system came to be, on a large scale in 1950 or so, and today 99% of chickens, eggs, turkeys that you find in the grocery store, they're coming out of confinement. A smaller portion, probably around 70% of beef, but still almost everything you're finding in a grocery store today is coming out of a factory farm that is directly working against nature. There's many other problems we can get into if you want. Now, when it comes to animal products, grass-fed, as of 2016, is no longer a regulated term. So all cows are fed grass for the first 2/3 of their lives, right? They come out of the womb and they go on to grass. And the problem with that is in the later, 100 days of their lives, most of them are shipped off to feedlots, right? And then they're fed grains, and the practices change a bit depending on the scenario. So 100% grass-fed is more of a sure bet, but if it just says grass-fed, no one's checking on that, no one's verifying that. They could absolutely be fed grains, okay? And you won't know that from the label. And when it comes to organic meat, probably better standards, for welfare. They're not using certain chemicals, they're not using antibiotics, but they're not always on pasture, like you'd imagine. And they're often fed organic grains, right? So especially in chicken and pork and cows too. So there's dairy cows that can still be in confinement. They only have to be out on pasture for a small period of their lives. And so when you feed animals grain, it changes the fatty acid profile. And again, we're missing this really valuable opportunity to restore the health of the land and get back to a more traditional type of farming, because there are confinement kind of organic operations as well. And so regenerative meat is a very new term, and you'll see it in stores. And there's not a lot of regulation around it, unfortunately, yet. And so you really still then have to kind of, okay, who are these people? Kind of do some checking. But regenerative meat should be meat where animals live in accordance with nature. Many of them are not using pesticides, hormones, or antibiotics. They're using animals on the land in a way, we can talk about what that looks like, that actively restores ecosystems, and also in a way that is just in alignment with animals as not a commodity, but as animals. They're allowing them to live a very healthy, happy life, which is not being done in a lot of industrial farms today. I've just learned some really sad things about them if you want to go into it, but that's kind of the gist, right? Grass-fed is not always grass-finished, and that matters to a lot of people. And organic is not always grass-fed, for its entirety of its life. They're not always not in confinement. And regenerative meat is not super regulated at this point, but is raised in a way that is in alignment with nature and is actively restoring the ecosystem.
Wow, that is such a wonderful explanation. So really then when we're looking at this and from a health perspective, like you mentioned, you touched on this is what your dissertation, part of what your dissertation's in right now is this fatty acid profile. And when we're eating, and this, what's interesting about everything you just broke down is it really debunks all of the beliefs around, farming being bad for the environment, meat being bad for the human, and animals being treated cruelly, right? Like that debunks all of it, because when it is done right, when you're regeneratively farming and you're supporting farmers and companies who do that, not only are you protecting the environment, you're protecting the animal, and you're protecting your health. So you're getting all of these benefits. So touch on, I saw that got you fired up, this whole idea about meat and animals being bad for the environment and bad for our health. What do you say when people, I mean, I get it all the time. I can't even imagine how many times you guys get it.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah. So I'm actually creating a docuseries. I don't know if I told you this. I'm probably halfway done, so I can send you the first 2 episodes. But many of the
Awesome.
people in our regenerative meat delivery service were unsubscribing because they wanted to go vegan for the planet. I mean, not a lot of them, but when they did, we always inquired why. And so I thought, oh no, we need to do some educating around this topic. So the first one goes into the history of the anti-meat narrative. So really cool pieces of research, just came out around red meat, right? Annals of Internal Medicine, a huge groundbreaking paper saying red meat is not the dietary villain that we thought it was. Saturated fat, there's been more than 20 reviews saying saturated fat, again, is not the link to heart disease we thought it was. And so all of these kind of beliefs about the compounds and the nutrients found in red meat and animal products they're crumbling, right? Cholesterol, we already know those dietary guidelines to restrict their intake have been eliminated. But what most people don't know is there's a lot of religious influence. Seventh-day Adventist Church, Ellen G. White, she was a prophetess back in the day. She believed that the Garden of Eden diet did not include animal products. And she taught that to John Harvey Kellogg. And they created Kellogg's cereal in an effort to prevent kids from eating meat because they believed it led to lustful desires. So Seventh-day Adventists, it sounds like, okay, well, so what? But very, very powerful group of people, even in our dietary guidelines, in our committees. They run hospitals, they run our food companies. They are very, very influential. And there was a man named Dr. Gary Fettke, and he was a surgeon in Tasmania, Australia, and he was performing amputations on his diabetic patients. And he told them to avoid sugar. He wanted to help them. He was learning about low carb. And he got turned into the medical board and suffered 4 years of litigation. He became the first doctor ever silenced about talking about nutrition. And his wife kind of uncovered this. Yes, it's a crazy story. We highlight it in the docuseries. But his wife, seeing him present reputable science about the benefits of low carb, and she realized it's not about information, it's about bias. So religious bias is one section. There's also entrepreneurial benefits, right, to the demonization of animal products because they can produce all of these different combinations of like wheat and corn and rice and soy and for days, and then their profit margins are large. So this plant-based industry has a lot of incentive to demonize animal products because it's very profitable. Even Crisco, William Procter and James Gamble, created our first real veggie oil concoction. And it wasn't because they knew it was healthier. In fact, they didn't study it at all. It was because it was a great entrepreneurial move and they were brilliant marketers. They convinced the American public that it was better. And so what I first say is you have to understand that this bias against meat, we've been eating it for 2.6 million years. There's never been a vegan culture. It contains nutrients like B12, iron, which is one of our biggest worldwide nutrient deficiencies, high quality protein that can help us eat less, maintain muscle mass, some of the most important things that we need in our diet. And it hasn't been until the last century when our health has really gone off the rails. It simply doesn't make sense that animal products are ruining our health. Okay, so that's the health argument. The environmental argument, again, it's only been since the last 100 years, right? Agriculture, for the last 10,000 years, we have been taking out more than we put in. We've been extracting too much, right? We need to kind of fix it. But animals are not the cause of that. A lot of people just believe that desertification is a result of the animal. Now, Alan Savory, if you guys haven't watched his TED Talk, I highly recommend that you do. He was an ecologist out of Africa, believed that ruminants were destroying ecosystems. And so he and his colleagues decided to kill 40,000 elephants. When they did, the land did not get better, the land got worse. So land, especially desertified ecosystems, they require animal impact. In fact, that is how our prairies evolved, with tens of millions of bison and elk fertilizing it and, kind of like stimulating the grass growth. It's not the animal, it's the way that we're managing the animal, right? So feedlot system, absolutely. There are environmental detriments. There are manure lagoons, like I said. There are animal waste problems, air, water pollution, antibiotics, pathogens. It's a big deal. And overgrazing, we're destroying our topsoil for sure. But when it comes to raising an animal regeneratively, that's a very, very different thing. And it is in fact one of the most important and powerful tools that we have. And just to kind of drive this point home, I don't know if you know about white oak pastures. I'm sure you do, down in
Yes.
Georgia.
Yeah.
Yes, and
I'm
I hope,
familiar with
yeah.
them. In
So
fact, I've connected with them a little bit.
gosh, great. So they did this analysis where they looked at kind of all the life cycle, like when you put everything that it caught, like that is necessary to create a cow, you take in to consideration its methane release and the food that's being produced. What is the net outcome for emissions? And it was one of the only foods with a positive impact, right? So other research has shown every time you have conventional beef, or the average at least, 33 pounds of carbon are released into the atmosphere for every pound produced. And when you get to chicken and soy, it's more like 6 and 3, and pork's a little bit higher. But regeneratively raised beef is a negative 3.5. And even plant-based burgers are around a release of 3.5 to 4.5. So Will Harris told me he knew there was a God when he found out that in order to offset the emissions from a plant-based burger, you would have to eat one of his grass-fed, regeneratively raised burgers. And so there's so much nuance here, and it literally took 7 episodes to teach you about all the different things, but I hope that did some justice. It's not the same system. People are misusing statistics from feedlot and confinement and industrial systems and believing that that is the only way to raise animals, and that's absolutely completely inaccurate.
Wow. I feel like it was like mic drop. That was a beautiful, educated way. Seriously, though,
I'm pretty
it's so
passionate about
true.
it.
Yeah. And Autumn's sermon is now concluded. Just kidding. But
Sorry.
no,
It's
do
just,
not
yeah.
apologize. This is such important information. And, again, when we know better, we do better. And we are so
Yeah.
quick to believe that everything that is put out, that it's for our best. It's for our best interest. When
Yeah.
unfortunately we're human, and most always our first inclination, and I don't like to admit this myself, and I hope that I'm not always this way, but our first kind of like motive is to protect self, right? And we have this
Yeah.
selfish desire to preserve and protect. And so then we have to take that a little bit further and go, okay, so what's the bigger agenda? Is there an agenda behind this? And I love how you just explained that everything has an agenda. I mean, talk about the pasteurization of milk. And that started as a great idea because, yeah, people were getting sick, but rather than fixing the problem and looking at moving the cows out of the city onto green pasture, they were like, oh, well, this is an opportunity and we can fix this and make more money.
Yes,
So
it was like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was
no,
going to
go,
say,
go,
Dr.
go.
Alice Stanton said it, she said it so brilliantly. It's like we're being asked to upgrade our light bulbs, we're being asked to upgrade our cars. So we just need to upgrade our cows, right? It's not that we should get rid of them, it's we just need to upgrade our meat. That's it.
So good.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And upgrade our investment into our health. Like I think that's the biggest thing is we've become so used to being able to have this convenience of going to the store and grabbing something real quick, or going to the restaurant and not questioning like where your food's coming from, and that is costing us to the point where I mean we've seen the rise of cancer, and all these other diseases just shoot through the roof in the last few years. And in the last few years, we've also felt like we've lost a little bit of control over certain things that we wanted. And we saw food supply go down. We saw all these things. And so people were desiring not only convenience, but kind of this like quick fix and uh, what can I find and what can I have on my shelf that will last a long time, right? And rather than
Yeah.
going, what is a better way to approach this and where should I be investing my money? And I mean, food is not just a medicine. Food is a matter and a means of communication with your body, with your cells. It's the driver and the engine. Like it is all the things. And so, when I have somebody come to me and they say, Susan, well, this one person told me that, I have cancer and I need to avoid animal meats because it's inflammatory. And this is the conversation that we come back to is, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the inflammatory. Because yes, it probably is. The meat you're eating now very well could be. And let's actually, I want to ask you that since this is especially what you're like working on right now. Can you help us understand, those who are listening who may be still like, oh yeah, I don't really like spending that extra amount of money on, grass-fed, organic, regeneratively farmed beef. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
go with the 4.99 pack of ground beef. Can you help us understand from a health perspective, like what's happening in our body when we consume conventional beef versus a really good regeneratively farmed organic beef?
That's such a great question. And I'm going to tell you about the research that's currently being done to investigate that further. There was one interesting study, Arya et al., 2010. We can look it up. So what they did was they look at if you eat wild meat, in this case it was a kangaroo, and you compare that to meat beef raised in a feedlot, what happens to your levels of inflammation in the body after that meal? And they found that the wild meat, the grass-fed meat, resulted in significantly lower levels of inflammation, right, than the meat raised in a feedlot. So inflammation could be a piece of that puzzle. Now, obviously that study, we don't know for sure because it wasn't a beef to beef comparison, but Dr. Stefan Van Vliet out of Utah State is currently doing that study. I just got to go visit, and they're doing a conventionally raised burger versus grass-fed regeneratively raised burger versus a plant-based burger. And then they're going to look at what are the levels of inflammation like in the body. So that research is kind of just being begun, and it's looking at, does the change in the fatty acid and nutritional profile, does that matter for human health? He's also going to do a study where he looks at if you eat a completely regeneratively raised diet, all foods coming from a regenerative system, is that different than a conventional system? And so that is another study that is yet to be done. So other studies have found things like changes in HDL and small changes in, I think it was like waist circumference. So we're still starting to study that. But what I can tell you is the nutritional profile changes, and sometimes dramatically. So I'm specifically looking at fatty acids. We know in beef, in dairy and pork and eggs and chicken, the fatty acid profile changes a lot, right? You can have high levels of linoleic acid, omega-6 fatty acids, when animals are fed grain, okay? And that changes dramatically in those animals. What we're also finding is it changes a lot in beef too. And it's, you see higher levels of CLA, which is conjugated linoleic acid, which is supposed to be protective against heart disease and cancer, and maybe even improving body composition. Higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, some people will tell you, well, the absolute amount of omega-3s in beef is not that large, so it doesn't matter. But there's actually been research to show, this was a McAfee trial, I believe 2011, that when you eat grass-fed red meat, the levels in your blood of omega-3s go up in an appreciable way. So it was a significant way. And so then you're going to see lower levels of linoleic acid and also higher levels of long chain saturated fats. So we often think saturated fats are bad, but there's long chain versions that seem to be protective against cardiovascular disease. Those are also increased in grass-fed meat. And then the other cool thing is that phytonutrients, they're compounds in animals or in plants that we typically associate with health benefits, though they aren't necessarily deemed essential. But they're very important for reducing inflammation, anti-tumor, anti-depression, anti-cancer benefits. They increase dramatically when an animal is fed grass or on pasture. And so there's a lot of changes. We are often looking at, what about vitamin E? What about, vitamin A and vitamin B? We're looking at like 12 nutrients on a nutrient panel. There are tens, like thousands of actual nutrients that change because we have a new advanced type of kind of analysis called metabolomics. And so we are just beginning to see really how dramatically this can affect health. But I would absolutely say there's no way that it can't, right? And even if it didn't immediately, a lifetime of it could probably be different. And then also we can't really separate ourselves from the environment anyway. So if we're eating meat that is degrading our environment, we are part of our environment. And so you just kind of have to take that all into account as well.
Yeah, that's so true. I was talking to another doctor the other day who said, yeah, I'm plant-based. I eat plants and I eat meat that eats plants. I'm like, yes, that's, that's going to be what
I
I say
love
now.
that. Yes, I love that.
That
And
was
that's the thing. I'm not arguing against plants. Yeah, I love plants. I think you should eat a ton of them. But there are just reasons that meat is really important part of our diet too.
Yes, as long as the meat is are eating plants. Not,
Yes, yes,
well,
raising
I should say
ways.
specific plants because corn and soy do and grains do technically grow in plants. But let's
Yeah.
let's switch gears really quickly to talk about poultry. And this is, I think, this is why we got chickens. As I continue to learn more, and you know better, you do better. And just the lack of proper labeling around poultry with eggs and eating the meat. Um, I saw a picture, and you could probably actually describe it because I'm sure you know more about this, but just a picture, and it was a picture of an organic farm. I won't say the name because I cannot remember the brand, but it's a I recognize the brand immediately. I think I've bought their eggs before. It was an organic farm that raises meat, chickens, and eggs. And it was horrifying. And it says organic, and it says, I think, either cage free or free range on the packaging. And what I saw was not anything that I would want to consume. But yet again, the labeling and the difference in that. Can you touch on just like how that works with, you mentioned it briefly, but with poultry especially?
Yeah, so what that is that's greenwashing. So people understand consumers care about how their animals are treated, what their animals are eating, and what kind of life they lead. And so they interpret these regulations very differently, right, from operation to operation. And so when it comes to poultry specifically, yes, cage free means almost nothing. You can still have like thousands of animals in a warehouse, just like on top of each other, that are never outside, that are not eating a species appropriate diet necessarily. They're not like finding worms and just like in the pasture like they should be. They can literally be inside their whole lives. So that's sad thing about cage free. And then free range isn't a lot better either, because all that's required for that is them to have access to the outdoors. And that can look like, again, various types of interpretations around these. Just a door that they don't even really go out of, but they do have access to, that might not even go to a pasture. It just kind of goes to like this concrete plot outside. And I just read the book Righteous Pork Chop. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I just learned so many things about the poultry industry that I just really didn't like. And it was, one of them was when they raise, for eggs production specifically, they kill about 300 million male baby chicks every year because they're just not useful in that system, because we've kind of created these genetic profiles, right? So broiler chickens are really different than egg laying chickens because one produces lots of meat and the other produces lots of eggs. And so there is no reason to keep those male baby chicks alive. And so they're just electrocuted or just disposed of. And that's the thing. It's like animals are not commodities, right? And we don't, even if it is cheaper, right, at the checkout, we have to realize we're paying, the animals are paying for that. The environment is paying for that, right? And your health is paying for that. And we're kind of like, these industrial systems are only working because they're putting all of the externalities, they call it, all of the costs onto consumers and onto society. So yes, when it comes to chickens, you want to get pasture raised chickens. It's really hard to find this done well. This is consistently one of the issues with our company. We're doing great now. We found some, but there aren't very many people who are doing it really, really well at a scale that we need for our company. But yeah, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Most
It's
chickens do not have a very good quality of life.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what I mean, so many consumers are buying chicken, they're buying eggs, and they're buying the meat. And yeah, that was pretty devastating to learn. Well, let's talk about then this awesome solution that you guys came up with wild pastures. I mean, I am like, here's actually a funny story. My sister-in-law, who is not a practitioner, she just has kind of followed my health advice over the years. She's a realtor, and she told me, Autumn, like right when you guys started, she was like, Season, you really should check this out, because don't you work with Paleo Valley? I think it's their company. And she was getting your boxes. And I just never thought twice about it until Matt reached out. He's like, Season, did you know what we're doing? And so anyways, mind blown. I'm on my third box of this meat. And I am like, I mentioned to you guys in the beginning before we hit record, I was telling her about this, but my family is pumped. What I'm most surprised about with this option you guys have provided is the price point. Because again, we're so used to paying, and I'm willing to do it because I understand I prioritize our health and our money goes into food. But I'm so used to paying so much money for good meat. And so tell us a little bit about Wild Pastures and this process that you guys have created.
Yes. So that was, I learned from a lot of our farmers and ranchers how important regenerative farming was. I was also learning how degraded our soil was and how maybe my son would see a day where he couldn't grow his own food. And so when we talked to these farmers and I was really excited about it, I would tell my clients, hey, get regeneratively raised meat. And they would say, I don't know where to find that. And when I do, it's like, it costs me an arm and a leg. I just don't have the room for that. And so we decided we were going to be really creative and be exclusively American-based farmers. Most meat delivery services are importing. In fact, 75% of grass-fed beef in America is brought in from another country. So it just undermines our farmers and ranchers who might want to go that route. And then also exclusively regenerative farms, right? So we're not doing just grass-fed. It's like they have to be actively rehabilitating the environment, and we're also paying for some of their fees now to help farmers to transition so we can really spread the movement. But the price point was the biggest thing for us. We wanted it to be available for everyone, no matter where you live, no matter how much you make, because it's a very mission-driven business. It's like, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a big old system of factory farms we're up against, and so it's 40% less cost than most other meat delivery services. It's riding around $9 a pound for all cuts, right? Steaks, roasts, ground beef, chicken, all the things. If you go into Whole Foods today, you're going to get, a pound of ground beef for, $11, $12, depending on where you are. But yeah, and most meat delivery services are up about $13 per pound. And we've done that in a number of ways. We're really creative, local delivery whenever we can, recyclable packaging. We use every single part of that animal, right? The bones go into our bone broth. The tallow goes into our restaurant, right? And the collagen, same thing, goes into our bones. And every single part of the animal is used. Nothing is wasted. And that's how, and we really, well, there's been inflation and meat prices continue to rise. We haven't ever had to raise our prices, because again, we really are dedicated to helping people make this kind of transition in a way that is accessible and affordable for them. So it's a meat delivery service. You get 15, 25-pound boxes, totally customizable. And rather than having to go to the store and wade through all of these crazy labels that generally look better than they really are, it just kind of shows up to your doorstep in recyclable packaging. If you're local, we have 5-6 different distribution centers throughout the country. So we try to keep it local whenever possible. And yeah, that's
It's
Wild
so
Pastures.
awesome. And you can customize it. You can customize your order each month. Like I was telling her, we had to add a few more things of bacon, beef bacon this month because we were running low. And
Yes!
the steaks. So this was the part that
Oh,
my husband is a little bit of a skeptic with everything. I call him the healthy skeptic, which I love. He always holds me accountable to everything I'm learning. But he's always complained about grass-fed, grass-finished meat. And we've always bought it from one of our local farmers or a farmer that we're familiar with. And it's just always been the steak, especially. It's just I don't care. I don't notice it, but he always just says it's just not the same. But he'll eat it because he knows how healthy it is. Okay, when we got our wild pasture steaks, he was like, "Well, where'd you get these?" And I was like, "Babe, this is from Wild Pastures." He was like, "No way." So again, totally sold on the flavor profile, and
oh my
it
gosh.
tastes good, right?
Well, yeah, and that was a hard thing to do. Yeah, you kind of like find that beef from different parts of the country, it kind of has a different thing and flavor and different producers. And, it's kind of like wine, right? Different
Yeah.
varietals. But we found really high quality suppliers. And yeah, our steaks are amazing. And if you do like a little, onion powder and some cayenne or whatever you like, and you don't have to do much. You just put a little bit on the outside, and then you literally sear them for like 2.5 minutes on each side. It is amazing. It's simple. I've never liked steak. I'm eating steak, and my son loves it. And also the breakfast sausage is another favorite around our family too.
Oh, I gotta try that. Okay, we'll try the breakfast sausage. Well, yeah, we're so thankful for it.
Yeah.
This was again, I love how you're meeting the need that many of us would just go, oh, we'll figure out how to do this and we'll do it for ourselves. But you're like helping solve a global crisis and you're meeting the need of so many people's health. And it's amazing.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Yeah, that's our goal. It's just like we just need to make the healthy option the easy one, right? And
Yeah.
That's what we're just trying to do. So thank you for all of your support. That means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we'll link to Wild Pastures. I actually, they were generous and have passed on a discount code. So we'll put that in the show notes as well for you to grab your first box. But I promise you will not be disappointed in this. And before we go, Autumn, first of all, this has been awesome. I told you guys she's so smart. I love, by the way, I caught that you said in the beginning, you were like, yeah, and this is my last. You made a comment around like, well, this is my last part of school, and I wanted to laugh like, yeah, right. 2 years from now, you're going to be like, so now I'm getting.
Oh
But
my
anyways,
gosh, I know.
impressive,
It's
impressive.
like my addiction.
Yeah, to learn. That's
Yeah.
not a bad
My
addiction.
husband's like, yeah, it's true. If you have to have one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, Matt's trying to cut you off. Like, no more school, no more school.
He is. He's like, that's it.
That's hilarious.
But what were you saying? I'm sorry, I forgot. I
So
forgot.
before we go, I always like to ask my guests if there's something that is
Mm,
inspiring you lately. And it could be anything. It could be you, whatever is
yeah.
inspiring you.
Yes, there's two things. The first is, for the first time in my life, I'm doing somatic therapy. Have you done this?
No.
Okay. So it's just like a therapy of the nervous system, of how to self-regulate. It's a very strategic way to kind of drop in and become aware of what your nervous system is doing and how to bring yourself in and out of different states. And it's been absolutely life-changing for me. So somatic therapy is the first. Highly recommended. I think a lot of us are very stressed and we don't even recognize it. And that was my story. I didn't know how to see the signs. I was kind of just always on go. And now I'm learning life needs rhythm, right? Stress is at the
Mm.
basis of a lot of our disease. And so, yeah, so I'm learning the rhythm of life, which is a great thing. And then the second one is I just got this parenting course from Dr. Shafali. Are you familiar with Dr. Shafali?
No. I love learning new things.
Oh my goodness. Yes, she wrote this incredible book called A Radical Awakening. It's a very, very cool book, but her parenting course is awesome. So, just a parenting course on how to find and identify our children's needs that might be leading to behaviors like screens or, whatever, or lack of motivation, and just like really finding the root cause. It's like very much like what we're doing for diet, but about parenting. And it's something I think your audience might benefit from that I'm loving.
That's awesome. That's so funny because we can talk all day, especially you and I, right, about health and what we're learning and businesses and being an entrepreneur and changing people's lives. And then all of a sudden you come home and you're completely humbled by being a parent because you realize how much you don't know. And every day you feel like you're starting from ground zero. So I love that. I love that suggestion.
Yeah, that's what I find too. It's just like, and I think the sooner you recognize and admit, hey, I don't know it all as a parent and I'm not going to, and you release that need for control over everything, I think for me at least, that's when things start going a lot better.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like, I'm not going to control this. I'm going to be a part of it and do the best I can. But that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this has been so great. Thank you so much. I know your schedule is so full and you are on a mission. And I just love that. I'm so inspired by your mission and we're personally benefiting from it. And so is Kick Cancer. And so many people that I know. So we appreciate you guys. And thank you for taking the time to share with everybody. I'm sure we'll have you back on soon because you have so much to share. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Susan. I remember the day I met you and I was just like, oh, this is a really special person and a really special mission that you have too. So thanks. I love our synergy. I'm always here for a conversation with you. And whenever I see you on my schedule, I get excited. So just thanks.
Thank you. Love that. Oh,